Yemen is facing a famine, 12 million people at risk of starvation. The UN is appealing for money, but what does it take to avert a humanitarian crisis in a country ravaged by war? This is Inside Story. Welcome to the programme. I'm Sahil Rahman. In Yemen, starvation is a disaster that's unfolding on a daily basis. The United Nations says half the country is on the verge of famine. The international community is being asked to donate more than $2 billion to help ease the crisis before it gets even worse. The threat of famine has been brought on by nearly 2 years of civil war. Iran-backed Houthis have been fighting against a Saudi-led coalition. At least 10,000 people have been killed. The majority of the population has only limited access to food and medicine.
Yemen is one of the most food insecure countries in the world. A staggering 7.3 million people do not know where their next meal is coming from. If there is no immediate action, and despite the ongoing humanitarian efforts, famine is now a real possibility for 2017. Malnutrition is rife and is rising at an alarming rate.
The UN has described the crisis as catastrophic and rapidly deteriorating, especially among children. More than 2 million of them are described as acutely malnourished. One child under the age of 5 is dying every 10 minutes. 19 million people, that's 2/3 of the country's population, don't have access to safe drinking water or sanitation. Starvation can lead to other complications like pneumonia and diarrhoea. But more than half of Yemen's medical facilities are destroyed and the health ministry has no operational budget. And many people never make it to the available feeding centres or hospitals because they can't afford the transport. Well, let's bring in our guest now. Here in Doha is Majoub Zuhairi, Associate Professor in Contemporary History of the Middle East at Qatar University. In Riyadh, Ahmed Al-Ibrahim, a Saudi affairs specialist, and from Sana'a, via Skype, Emma O'Leary, a humanitarian access advisor in Yemen for the Norwegian Refugee Council. Welcome to all my guests for this edition of Inside Story. Emma, could I come to you first? Could you just tell me what the situation is like on the ground? We hear so much about bombings and deaths, but the reality of what's going on for the ordinary Yemeni person on the ground.
So as you've alluded to, it's really difficult to visualise the sheer scale of the humanitarian crisis that Yemen is faced with at the moment. 18.8 million people out of a population of 27 million are in need of some kind of humanitarian assistance. And out of those, 3.3 million are suffering from severe acute malnutrition. So that means they're at risk of death if they don't get adequate medical attention. Yesterday, with some colleagues here in Sana'a, we visited a local hospital and we saw the real effects of that malnutrition. We saw babies as young as 5 months that weighed 2-3 pounds, their mothers themselves too malnourished to feed them. The scale of the crisis really is shocking.
You are one of many organisations that's trying to help the country itself. But when the UN makes an appeal of $2.1 billion, in terms of your organisation, what are the nuts and bolts of the assessments that need to be made and the needs of the people on the ground?
What NRC will be looking at in terms of our response is 4 main areas. That's water, sanitation and hygiene, shelter, education and food security. Our work is focused on working with IDPs here in Yemen. So over 2 million people are currently displaced due to the conflict, owing to either ground fighting in the areas where they come from or owing to their homes being destroyed by airstrikes. So those are the people we'll be focused on helping.
Right, let me bring in Ahmed Al-Ibrahim here, a Saudi affairs specialist in Riyadh. Good to have you on the programme. Many people in the wider international community and observing what's going on will just see this as a war by Saudi on Yemen against rebels, militia, however you want to describe the Houthis. What is Saudi Arabia doing in terms of making sure that there is access to humanitarian aid for those people that need it and working alongside the organisations that need to get it to those people where the Yemeni authorities can't?
Well, as you know, Saudi Arabia, they are doing the unprecedented, the impossible to deliver these endless of trucks. I mean, if you go down to the border of Saudi Arabia with Yemen, you're going to see piles of kilometers of trucks, all from King Salman Humanitarian Association. I mean, Saudi Arabia has been pushing all the aid they can do to the whole cities that affected in Yemen. They are even trying to get the, you know, the supplies, the medical supplies and the food to the area that is actually controlled by the Houthi. They are desperately trying to get those people to accept these kind of things. We do understand that some of these things are controlled by the Houthis, and the Houthi end up getting all these food supplies and medical supplies and give it to the kids, and they go sell it somewhere else. So Saudi Arabia trying to manage these kind of supplies into Yemen and get distributed to the needy people in Yemen. We understand a couple of days ago that Saudi Arabia, with the coalition, of course, they achieved the opening and liberating the city of Al-Makha and Al-Maidi, and this is actually an opening through the sea, which is going to contribute a lot on what Saudi Arabia is trying to do. So Saudi Arabia, they do have a strategic places in order to attack and eliminate the Houthis and Saleh, yet they do have a more strategic places where they could get the humanitarian stuff inside of Yemen.
Yeah, indeed. You make it sound like a great PR campaign, certainly for the Saudi authorities, but yet many of the detractors...
It's not a PR campaign, it's fact.
Many of the detractors would say, if I can just get the question up, many of the detractors would say that there has been an embargo on Yemen. You know, the Saudis will get the aid in to the areas, yes, that they can get access to, or that they want to get access to, but there is an embargo by land, certainly, because people can't escape the areas of conflict, and they can't go by sea either.
That's definitely, I'm sorry, not a right statement. Saudi Arabia is trying to do the possible to get, it's not a PR campaign. Listen, Saudi Arabia is a full-fledged country. They do work with a organized channel. They are not a militia like Al-Houthis or like Ali Abdullah Saleh. We work under the umbrella of the United Nations. If you remember, 6 months ago, Saudi Arabia collected 70 kids, Houthi kids. They were armed and they're trying to attack the border, and they compiled all those kids and they gave them back to the United Nations. If you get your facts from the United Nations, you're going to understand what Saudi Arabia has been doing in order to help the Yemeni people on the ground.
Okay.
But if we're going to rely on a different agency, which is, you know, they send people to a different hostile area that's controlled by the Houthis, where they use humans as a shelter and start, you know, putting rockets and all kind of stuff so they could get attacked to the people, of course you're going to get, you know, these different things. I suggest
Ibrahim,
United Nations, which is a world organization that the whole world report to. So Saudi Arabia do have an unprecedented record.
And I think you've made Saudi Arabia's case for the moment. Let's continue with the debate. It is a debate between us. Mahjoub, you're listening to that. I mean, obviously it's very difficult to have a conversation like this which talks about humanitarian aid on one side and it's directly related to a conflict across a huge country.
If you allow me to add one sentence, listen,
I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you. Ahmed, I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. Let everybody have a chance to speak. Mahjoub, the issue of trying to get access and trying to get humanitarian aid is used as a political ploy as well, and can be used in propaganda in lots of different ways from both sides. How difficult is it for the Saudis not only to conduct such an offensive, as are the Houthis, but also make sure that both sides, as they want to, say we are getting help to those people that need it most?
You know, Suhail, let's put things in a context. Yemen has a major problem even before this kind of military operation. Yemeni state or Yemeni government was nearly named as a failed state. There is no control. There is a problem of performance in the government. So basically, the economic problems, which basically led to this crisis, was already rooted in Yemen. Now, this crisis or this conflict has added more to the original conflict or original instability in Yemen. Now, it
never reached to a level of starvation on this level.
The assessment of United Nations, to be honest with you, I would agree with it. But however, the crisis even was last year, even 2015. The United Nations does not need to wait until 2017. The crisis does exist before, and Yemenis...
Is it a crisis that was more political? Because we're talking about 20 years ago. If we just put it again into context for our viewers, we're looking at a country like Yemen who didn't support, for example, the the coalition against
Yes.
the invasion of Kuwait.
Mm-hmm.
Saudi Arabia was very annoyed about this, as was Kuwait.
Yes.
It sent back nearly 800,000 Yemenis back to Yemen,
Yeah.
creating a huge economic problem for the country itself. And that is partly why Yemen's economy has gone down. It's been trying to sort itself out there.
Let's not forget that Yemen is also was ruled by a corrupted government as well. I mean, that's the corrupted political system. I think what we are seeing in the last about 2-3 years, there is a military operation or coalition led by Saudi Arabia. There is a green light from international community to try to get the legitimate government in Sana'a. The operation is not going as it should be. There's a lot of difficulty, it seems, on the ground. I think the coalition is trying to do their best, and in this there are a lot of casualties. And one of this is those people who are actually will not be able to receive a proper aid from different international organizations. I think it is the responsibility of those who are involved in the conflict. Is the responsibility of Yemeni government, which basically try to go to Yemen and try to run the so-called what is liberated from of Yemeni land, and it's the responsibility of the international community. This is a conflict recognized by the United Nations. It is international conflict. United States is involved, superpowers was involved, European organizations are involved. So it's actually this is a conflict needs an immediate intervention from international community rather than from one player, whether regional or international.
And we'll go into why perhaps the international players and stakeholders perhaps are not there in one respect. Emma, can I just come back to you? In the fact that you've got nearly 2.2 million people displaced within what seems to be very much the east of the country, the west of the country. Some parts have got safe havens, some haven't. How do you as an organisation, along with your aid partners, try and fathom out where those safe havens are and how to actually get that aid there?
Yeah, I mean, as has already been alluded to in the conversation, humanitarian access is a major issue for all of the humanitarian organisations operating here on the ground in Yemen. As our staff in the field try to reach those people in need, they are faced with various obstructions from both parties of the conflict on a daily basis. We're talking about security related obstructions and bureaucratic related obstructions as well. And really, for us to be able to get through to those people who are so desperately in need, we need those obstructions to be lifted. We need the parties to the conflict to respect international humanitarian law and to allow us safe access to the people in need. Okay,
then Ahmed Ibrahim, can I just ask, what conversations do the Saudi government have with aid agencies other than Saudi aid agencies to try and make sure the aid is being distributed or is getting through? What are they telling you about this?
Well, I just want to go back one step. Saudi Arabia and the coalition, every soul does count for them, any innocent soul, but you can't do so much. This is a war. We're not fighting a recognized army with a camouflage.
We don't want to make this conversation, Ahmed, I must come in. We don't want to make the conversation too political.
Sure,
this conversation for this inside story is about humanitarian aid.
Question.
Yeah. It's about humanitarian aid. We want to try and sort that out.
Saudi Arabia, with King Salman, humanitarian aid, we are working under the umbrella of United Nations. We do give them on a daily basis a roundtable meeting on the statistics where these things are going, where the needy hospitals. We get reports within Yemen to the humanitarian agency on what is needed in each and every hospital. If there is hard cases in such a hospital, all these equipment is going to be sent there. If there is a needy people of food and there is an alarming starvation in such a area, they're going to send all these kind of trucks over there. So it's really pretty much organized within the security of the coalition.
To sum it up, Saudi Arabia is talking, then, you're saying, to aid agencies and to the UN, regardless
under the umbrella of the United Nations.
Okay, so therefore, one then has to ask, how long do you think it's going to take to try and help as many people, or as many of those that have been displaced? A population of nearly, 2.2 million is displaced at the moment. They need help. You talked about getting aid to hospitals. If I look at my statistics here, nearly, I think it's 45% of medical facilities are destroyed or unusable. That is a difficult scenario, is it not? If you then have to get aid, medical aid, to ad hoc tents or tented cities, if that, to help people in Yemen.
Well, actually, I can tell you, within Saudi Arabia, there was a lot of government tenders in mobile hospitals. They are moving these state-of-the-art mobile hospitals to the urban areas that they could help those people. So as much as the Houthis destroy these hospitals, Saudi Arabia is trying to equate these hospitals into some sort of a way that they could help these people. So let's take an example like Taiz. Taiz is surrendered right now by the Houthis, and we cannot even send one truck into Taiz to help those needy people inside, just because of the Houthi. They are trying to attack capture the city, and they failed a couple times.
Indeed, and some would say that the hospitals have been destroyed, and some would say that the hospitals have been destroyed by Saudi airstrikes. That is a debate for another day for the moment. I want to go back to Emma, actually. Emma, when you hear there is a political a debate going on and the politics of this is so very complicated, then the UN says we want $22.5 billion for nearly 93.5 million people globally. One wonders how important Yemen is in that list, because if I just allow you to know that Haiti, for example, requires 370 million in 2017. Syria, the appeal for them is 3.4 billion. Afghanistan is 550 million. It seems that there are nearly 25 global appeals for money. How important is it for you to try and appeal, not just to the UN to help you, but also to the public at large around the world to help you with this appeal?
As you've mentioned, there are a number of very high-profile humanitarian crises across the world at the moment, and they all need to be given due attention and due resources by the international community. I would say, and I'm sure that most of the humanitarian organisations operating here in Yemen would agree with me when I would say that the international community has largely not given Yemen the attention it deserves to date. And that's for a number of reasons. Partly because Yemen isn't part of the ongoing refugee crisis. We don't see Yemenis travelling to Europe and elsewhere seeking asylum for a number of reasons, partly because of the geography of the area, partly because of the difficulties with getting out. So that has made it a slightly lower profile crisis. And then we have the difficulties with getting journalists in. So there's difficulty reporting from here, which again affects international awareness of the crisis. And then we also have perhaps a desire in some parts of the world to not openly discuss what's going on in Yemen. And because of all of those reasons, really the country just has not been given the resources and the attention it needs from the international community.
Okay,
if we're to prevent the country from really falling into famine, what's going to happen needs to be a full funding of the UN humanitarian response plan. That's what we need to see.
You were nodding with Emma just a moment ago. I think it was the issue about the international community taking its eye off the ball and ignoring the scenario.
I mean, these numbers are scary. I mean, those countries are in need for money now, not tomorrow. This shows you that the United Nations, actually, as an international organization, has been from the beginning, aimed to build peace, to end conflicts, are failing actually to solve the conflicts, to end the conflicts. And the United Nations today is becoming a charity to bring money and to help those actually to maintain the status quo of conflict rather than solving those conflicts. These are scary numbers, shows that the international community and the United Nations are not doing enough politics to solve these conflicts. Because if those conflicts are solved, we will not need a humanitarian help. We will not need aid. Stability and security will solve major of those problems. And to me, actually, this is an indicator, actually very, very, very ugly indicator that United Nations is not doing enough to solve conflicts in the world today, unfortunately.
Well, let me bring in Emma Al-Ibrahim, because obviously, I think everybody in Saudi Arabia, everybody in Yemen, the international community would like to see a solution, would like to see long-term peace. Very difficult to see that when millions and millions of dollars is being spent, certainly from the Saudi Arabian end. And these are very loose estimates that we're looking at something like $175 million a day or month actually, in this scenario, the military hardware that's being used. Saudi Arabia, as are many Gulf countries, oil-producing countries, finding it very difficult with the oil price going down. That's where they get their revenue. How long do you think Saudi Arabia is willing to continue this operation or try and find a negotiated peace?
I think Saudi Arabia is doing everything possibly to do in order to help the Yemeni people. Remember that we have almost 3.3 million people living among us, sharing everyday life with us. So Saudi Arabia is actually answering with the coalition. They are answering the demand of the legitimate government of Yemen in order to restore the legitimacy government in Yemen. So what you need to ask is, can Iran pull from Yemen and everybody live happily and safe and stop this mass killing? Can the Houthis stop putting all their propelled grenade on top of the schools and the mosque and use human shields as for missiles to be attacked? Can Houthis help? We are fighting a ghost. This ghost, we cannot, it's not a legitimate army. We are on the urge to end this war. We have one port to go for. It's Al Hudaydah port. If this port is going to be captured by the coalition, then all the misery of a humanitarian, the Yemeni people is going to end. This is the only gateway for Ali Abdullah Saleh and the Houthis to communicate with the whole world and to get the supply. I mean, you've seen last week when the Houthis attacked the Saudi destroyer. That tells you how much access do they have into the sea. And ask yourself why this destroyer was in the sea. Just to secure the ships of the humanitarians need to land it on the seaports. This is what the Houthi about. Houthis want to fail Saudi Arabia humanitarian, and they are asking. If you ask all the agency, they make it to Yemen, they go to Sana'a. Sana'a is conquered by the Houthis. You know, if you go to the other sides of the Yemen, you will see.
Emma, that would be obviously, what that is the line we would expect you to certainly come out with in terms of the information you're going to give us from the Saudi point of view. I want to just come back to Mahjoub here, because it seems that no matter what the argument is here in Yemen, Saudis are going to blame the Houthis are going to blame the Yemenis, the Saudis are going to say Iran's behind it all. When it's not a case of when will it all stop, how can it all stop? How can this be negotiated to actually sitting down and talking around a table? Because if we just quickly look at Syria, the thought process now after so many years is we've got to talk about this around a table and try and find a way forward.
Absolutely, Suhail. I mean, these are a political conflict. Unless you can discuss a humanitarian side of it and say, I want to get aid to those people for next 6 months. But if you are not focusing on the root of the conflict, this will continue. I think the key issue today is how the players, whether Saudi Arabia, Iran, United States, Yemenis themselves, how they can get together, how they can agree on principles to end this conflict, agree on roadmap, how to secure Yemen first, how to have stability, how to have political stability, then other issues will be solved. Without this, unfortunately, the humanitarian issue will not be solved the matter.
Emma, can I just come to you for the final comment in Sana'a? You've heard, you might say, two different sides of the debate here and the conversation that we've had. As a humanitarian, how important is it now, you might say, for the new United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, to try and, as Mahjoub just said, not be a charitable organisation, but a political organisation that really can try and find a solution to make your job a lot easier?
We are very aware here that the solution to the crisis in Yemen does not lie in humanitarian aid. Really what needs to happen over the long term is a negotiated peace agreement, and that's what we're really calling for the international community to work on. Really, what we're faced with here is a massive humanitarian crisis, collapsing economy, a failing private sector. We need the humanitarian community to come together to give Yemen the attention it deserves and to settle on a negotiated peace agreement so that the Yemeni people can live in the peaceful country that they deserve.
Well, there for the moment we will leave it. I'd like to thank Mahjoub Soureiri here in Doha for your time, also to Ahmed Al Ibrahim in Riyadh, and to you, Emma O'Leary, as well in Sana'a. And thank you to you for watching this edition of Inside Story. You can watch the programme again by visiting our website at aljazeera.com, and for further discussion go to our Facebook page. That's at facebook.com/ AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Sahil Rahman, and all of the Inside Story team, thanks very much for your time and your company.